I thought my aunt was the only person who believed in me. The one who told me to follow my dreams. But when I discovered she had been discouraging my parents from supporting me all along, I felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under me, leaving nothing but emptiness. I Sarah at my cousin's wedding reception while my fiancée Emma was in the bathroom, and in that moment I away 8 years for 30 seconds of validation from someone who reminded me of the dreams I thought I'd buried. Sarah was everything. Emma wasn't spontaneous, artistic, dangerous. She told me I was wasting my talent in accounting, that I should have stuck with music like I'd planned in college. Emma had always been practical about my hobby, suggesting I focus on stability instead of chasing fantasies. The kiss happened during the slow dance I should have saved for Emma. Sarah pulled me close and whispered, "Too creative for this suburban." And suddenly I was that 22-year-old again who'd wanted to move to Nashville before Emma convinced me that dreams don't pay mortgages. When Sarah's lips met mine, I wasn't thinking about Emma taking care of me through food last month, or how she'd supported me through my dad's cancer scare, or the way she still laughed at my terrible jokes after all these years. I was thinking about my Aunt Linda, the only person in my family who'd ever told me to follow my heart instead of my head. She was the one who bought me my first guitar at 16 when my parents called music a waste of time. She was the one who came to my college performances when everyone else was too busy. She was the one who said, "David, don't let anyone convince to be smaller than dreams." Even when I took the accounting job and moved in with Emma, Aunt Linda would pull me aside at family gatherings and ask if I was happy, really happy. 3 months after the wedding kiss, I was having a full affair with Sarah. She lived in a converted warehouse downtown, surrounded by canvases and musical instruments and the kind of creative chaos I'd convinced I didn't want anymore. We'd meet there twice a week while Emma thought I was working late. Sarah would play her original songs and I'd accompany her on guitar, and for those stolen hours I felt alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. That was incredible, sure, but what really hooked me was feeling like again. Sarah saw the artist in me that Emma had gently discouraged into dormancy. With Sarah I wasn't just reliable David with a steady job and the 41k. I was David the songwriter, David the dreamer, David who might still make something beautiful out of his. Emma started asking questions when I came home smelling like paint and cigarettes. "Seem different lately," she'd say, and I'd deflect by accusing her of being paranoid. I told I was protecting her feelings, but really I was protecting my escape route. I needed Sarah's world to exist, even if it meant lying to the woman who'd planned our entire future together. The worst part wasn't the lying though. It was how easy it became. Emma would show me wedding venues on her laptop, and I'd nod along while texting Sarah under the table. Emma would talk about starting a family and I'd make non-committal sounds while planning my next afternoon at the warehouse. Emma would reach for me in bed and I'd turn away, claiming exhaustion, because my body and my guilt belonged somewhere else. 4 months in, Sarah told me she was falling in love with me. We were lying on her paint-stained sheets after an afternoon that had started with music and ended with her wrapped around me like she never wanted to let go. "I love how see the world," she said, tracing patterns on my chest. "Irma doesn't understand the real I should have ended it then. Should have realized that Sarah was giving me permission to my down. And permission is the most dangerous thing can give someone who's already holding matches." Instead, I told her I loved her too. And I meant it, which made everything so much worse. That night I went home to Emma making my favorite dinner, wearing the sundress I'd bought her last summer, humming while she cooked because she'd had a good day at work and couldn't wait to share it with me. She'd picked brochures for a honeymoon in Italy, spread them across the kitchen counter like hope made tangible. "Look at this place in Tuscany," she said, pointing to a villa surrounded by vineyards. "We could rent bikes and tour the countryside. Remember how you used to talk about writing songs in Italy?" She remembered. After all these years, after all my complaints about my boring job and suburban dreams, she remembered that I'd once wanted to write music in Italian cafes. She'd been listening, had been planning to give me back pieces of I thought she'd buried. I told her the brochures looked great and went upstairs to shower off Sarah's perfume, and when I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I didn't recognize the man staring back. The end came 2 weeks later, not because I confessed but because Emma followed me. Emma showed at Sarah's warehouse on a Tuesday afternoon in March and I knew I was over the moment I heard her voice in the stairwell. Not angry, confused. "David, car's outside." "Okay." I was tuning Sarah's guitar, sitting shirtless on her bed while she painted at her easel in nothing but my button-down shirt. We'd just finished making love and were talking about running away together. Maybe to Colorado where Sarah had friends in the music scene. Real dreams this time, not the suburban pretense I'd been living with Emma. "Someone's here," Sarah said, and we both froze as Emma's footsteps echoed the concrete step. I should have thrown on clothes and met Emma at the door with some explanation. Any explanation that didn't involve her seeing me half in another woman's apartment. Instead, I panicked and hid in Sarah's bathroom like a coward, listening through the thin walls as Emma knocked and Sarah answered. "I'm Emma, David's fiancée. Is he here? His car's downstairs and he's not answering his phone." "Oh, Emma." Sarah's voice carried surprise but not guilt. She'd always known about Emma but had convinced herself that anyone keeping me from my artistic calling was the real villain in this story. He's not here right now. But his car. A walk to get coffee. "I'm Sarah, by the way. David's been helping me with some music projects." The lie hung in the air like smoke, and I could picture Emma processing it, her analytical mind catching all the details that didn't add. My car but no me. A woman answering the door in what Emma was smart enough to recognize as men's clothing. The smell of and secrets that clings to guilty spaces. "Music projects," Emma repeated, and I heard 8 years of trust dying in her voice. I listened to Sarah scramble for more lies while I cowered in a bathroom that smelled like turpentine and betrayal. Emma was asking detailed questions now the same way she fact-checked insurance claims at work. What kind of music? How long had we been working together? Why hadn't David mentioned Sarah before? Each question was a scalpel, precise and devastating. Sarah, for all her artistic wisdom, had never learned how to lie to someone who made a living catching liars. Finally Emma asked the question that shattered everything. Wearing David's shirt. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Then Emma said, "Where is he?" Not asking anymore. Demama, I can explain. Here I see. I came out of the bathroom then, because hiding any longer would have been the final act of cowardice that killed whatever was left of my soul. Emma turned toward me and I watched her face cycle through disbelief, understanding and something worse than anger. Disappointment so pure it felt like physics, like watching gravity betray. She looked at me standing there in my boxers, then at Sarah in my shirt, then at the unmade bed with sheets that told the whole story. She looked at the guitars leaning against the wall, the canvases covered in the kind of wild creativity I'd claim I didn't need anymore, the evidence of I'd been living behind her back for months. How long, she asked. Emma. Habalungi. For months, I whispered, because she deserved at least one honest answer. Emma nodded like she was filing that information away for later processing. Then she pulled off her engagement ring, the one she'd helped pick out, the one that cost 3 months' salary, the one that was supposed to represent our future, and set it carefully on Sarah's paint-stained dresser. I loved, she said to me, using past tense like a funeral. I loved enough to let be boring. I thought that's what wanted. She looked around the warehouse one more time, taking in the I'd built without her. I guess I was wrong about what needed. But I wasn't wrong about who are. Then she left, and I heard her footsteps going down the stairs, measured and final. I heard her car start. I heard her drive away, taking with her every plan we'd made and every promise I'd broken. Sarah tried to comfort me, said this was what needed to happen, that now we could be together openly. But standing in that warehouse in my underwear, surrounded by another woman's dreams, I felt more alone than I'd ever been in my. I drove home an hour later to find Emma's things already packed. She was efficient even in heartbreak, had filled 3 suitcases with surgical precision. She'd left behind the wedding dress in our closet like a ghost, and the Italy brochures still spread across the kitchen counter like evidence of futures that would never exist. Don't, she said when I tried to speak. She was sitting at our kitchen table, her kitchen table now I supposed, with paperwork spread in front of her, already dissolving our shared into legal documents. I need to tell something, I said anyway. I need to tell something, she interrupted, and her voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. I called Aunt Linda today. My turn to ice water. Emma. I called her cause I needed to understand. I needed to know if I was crazy for thinking been happy with me, if I'd imagined all those years when seemed content. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was covered in Emma's handwriting, notes from a phone conversation that had lasted, according to the timestamp, nearly an hour. Anne told me some interesting things, David. Things I think should know. I stared at the notes, afraid to read them, afraid not to. Emma's writing was as precise as always, capturing quotes with the accuracy of someone who'd spent years documenting facts for legal proceedings. She told me about the conversations she had with parents when we're in college. About how she convinced them not to co-sign loans for recording studio time. How she talked them out of helping with move to Nashville. How she told them that encouraging music was enabling an impossible dream. The room tilted. That's not, Aunt Linda supported my music. She bought me my first guitar, $40 guitar from a pawn shop. Emma read from her notes, which she told parents were enough encouragement for a hobby. But that anything more would be cruel. Quote, the boy needs to learn that not everyone gets to be a rock star. I felt like I was falling through the floor. She came to my performances. To make sure weren't getting too confident. To gauge whether we're developing what she called unrealistic expectations. She told parents after every show how amateur looked compared to the other acts. Emma's voice was steady, clinical, like she was reading a medical diagnosis. She told me he was protecting from enough disappointment, that she loved too much to let chase a dream that would end in poverty and failure. Why are telling me this? Emma looked from her notes, and her eyes held something I'd never seen there before. Pity. Because I need to understand something, David. I never tried to hold back from music. I supported accounting career because it made happy. We're good at it, made decent money, came home satisfied most days. I thought chosen stability because I'd grown, not because someone had sabotaged other options. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor like an ending. I would have supported music if I'd known it mattered to. I would have lived in a studio apartment in Eaton Raymond for years if it told me wanted to try. Instead decided I was the enemy and Sarah was salvation, when the real person who stole dreams was the woman thought believed in most. I tried to speak, but Emma wasn't finished destroying me yet. Linda asked me not to tell about our conversation. She said it would only to know the truth now that we're settled, but I'm telling because deserve to understand the real reason felt trapped. It wasn't because chose the wrong. It was because someone who claimed to love made sure never had a real choice. She picked her suitcases, 3 neat pieces of luggage that contained 8 years of shared existence. I hope Sarah makes happy, David. I really do, because away something real for someone who saw what thought wanted to be, while the person who actually sabotaged dreams is probably at home right now, proud of herself for protecting from own ambitions. The front door closed behind Emma with a soft click, and I was alone in our house that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. I called Sarah, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I called Aunt Linda, but couldn't bring to speak when she answered. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by Italy brochures and Emma's notes, understanding for the first time that I'd been angry at the wrong person for 8 years, and that my anger had cost me the only person who'd ever loved me exactly as I was. 6 months later, I'm writing this from a studio apartment that smells like regret and reheated pizza, because apparently that's what rock bottom smells like in real. Sarah lasted exactly 3 weeks after Emma left, just long enough for the excitement of our forbidden romance to in the harsh light of actual relationship logistics. Turns out sneaking around was half the appeal for her, and a man having an emotional breakdown about his aunt's decade-long psychological manipulation wasn't the tortured artist she'd been fantasizing about. Kind of pathetic, she said the last time I saw her, which was also the first completely honest thing she'd ever said to me. I thought we're this passionate creative soul trapped by suburban conformity, but just a guy who blames everyone else for his choices. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent our entire relationship treating her like my salvation when I was really just a middle-aged accountant having a midlife crisis in her bed. She moved to Colorado without me, last I heard, and I hope she found whatever she was looking for that wasn't me. Emma moved back to her hometown 3 hours away and got a promotion that came with a corner office and a salary I'll never match. I know this because mutual friends still post about her on social media, carefully excluding me from conversations about her success. In every photo, she looks lighter somehow, like she's been carrying invisible weight for years and finally set it down. She kept the engagement ring, according to her sister, not for sentimental reasons but because she'd legally earned it after 8 years of putting with my. I respect that level of practical closure. The confrontation with Aunt Linda happened on a Tuesday in April, 2 weeks after Sarah left. I drove to her house with 8 years of misplaced resentment and a phone recording of my conversation with Emma. Because I'm apparently the kind of person who records conversations for evidence now. Linda answered the door in her gardening clothes, same bright smile she'd worn my whole, the smile I'd trusted more than my own judgment. She invited me in for coffee like nothing had changed, asked about Emma and the wedding planning as if she didn't know she'd blown my entire existence. Emma and I broke, I said, skipping the small talk. Oh sweetheart, I'm sorry, what happened? The casual concern in her voice made me understand why sociopaths are so successful. She sounded exactly like the aunt who dried my tears after baseball games, and taught me to drive stick shift and told me I was special when everyone else called me average. I cheated on her, I said, because I wanted to watch Linda's reaction to my honesty, with a woman who told me I was wasting my artistic potential. Linda's face shifted almost imperceptibly like a mask slipping. David, haven't been artistic since college. That was just a phase, was it? Or did make sure it stayed a phase. I played the recording then, Emma's voice filling Linda's living room with revelations that hit like home demolition. Linda's face went through several expressions, surprise, calculation, resignation, before settling on defensive anger. I protected, she said when the recording ended. Do you have any idea how many men waste their entire 20s chasing impossible dreams? How many end bitter and broke at 40 cause no one loved them enough to be realistic? Destroyed my confidence before I ever had a chance to find out what I was capable of. I gave a real. Linda stood, gesturing around her comfortable living room like it was evidence of her wisdom. Have a good job, had a woman loved, we're building something stable. That's more than most people get. I had all that because made sure I was too scared to want anything else. Linda's mask slipped further. Parents were ready to throw good money after bad, co-signing loans for recording equipment and studio time. We're mediocre, David. Talented enough to dream but not talented enough to succeed. I saved family thousands of dollars and saved years of heartbreak. How to know I was mediocre? Made sure I never got the chance to find out. I heard perform. I watched other acts, weren't special. The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking, partly because it was delivered with such matter-of-fact confidence, partly because I could hear echoes of every doubt I'd ever had about my abilities. Linda had spent years planting those doubts, nurturing them, making sure they grew stronger than my dreams. Even if that's true, I said, it should have been my failure to own. Linda sat back down, suddenly looking older than her 68 years. I suppose I'd rather be poor and delusional than stable and realistic. I'd rather be honest. With the people I love. And how's that working out for? Linda's voice carried the sharp edge of someone who'd been backed into a corner. We're honest with Emma about affair, and now we're alone. We're honest with that artist girl about feelings and she left too. Maybe honesty is overrated. I stared at this woman who'd shaped my entire understanding of my own capabilities, who'd convinced me that wanting more than I had was dangerous and naive. She was still beautiful in that elegant way that had made her seem sophisticated when I was young, but now I could see the brittleness underneath, the fear of other people's success that had driven her to mine. Why? I asked, why couldn't just let me try and fail on my own? Linda was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands like they held answers. Finally, because I tried and failed, and no one protected me from it. I spent my 20s writing terrible poetry and waitressing in coffee shops, convinced I was one breakthrough away from literary fame. By the time I admitted I had no talent, I was 32 and had nothing to show for my except debt and embarrassment. The admission hung between us like a bridge I didn't want to cross. Understanding Linda's motivations didn't forgive what she'd done, but it explained the systematic way she dismantled my confidence. She hadn't been protecting me. She'd been protecting herself from watching someone else get the chances she'd so decided I should be as scared as were. I decided should be smarter than I was. Smart would have been letting me make my own mistakes. I left Linda's house that day knowing I'd never see her again, and I haven't. She sent a card on my birthday with a generic message and a check for $50, like she was paying off a debt. I never cashed it. The worst part of this whole disaster isn't the loneliness, though I'm lonelier than I've ever been. It's not the financial stress of supporting without Emma's income, though money's tight enough that I'm eating cereal for dinner more often than I care to admit. It's not even the public humiliation of having our entire social circle know I destroyed my engagement for a woman who dumped me 3 weeks later, though that stings every time I run into someone at the grocery store who asks about Emma with careful sympathy in their voice. The worst part is the music. I bought a guitar last month, the first one I've owned since college. Not a $40 pawn shop model like Linda gave me, but a real instrument that cost more than my monthly rent. I sit with it every evening in my empty apartment, trying to remember songs I used to know, trying to feel the creative spark Sarah claimed she saw in me. But 20 years of doubt are hard to overcome, even when know where the doubt came from. My fingers are clumsy on the frets. My voice cracks when I try to sing. The songs I write sound exactly as mediocre as Linda always said they would be. And I can't tell if that's because she was right about my talent or because she spent so long convincing me she was right that I made it true. Maybe that's her final victory. Not just stealing my confidence when I was young enough to rebuild it, but stealing it so thoroughly that even knowing what she did can't give it back. Emma was right about one thing: I away something real for something that was never there. Not Sarah, who was just a mirror reflecting what I thought I wanted to see, but the dream itself. I destroyed my chasing a version of that might have existed if different choices had been made 20 years ago. By me and by the people who claim to love me. Some nights I wonder what would have happened if I'd just talked to Emma instead of cheating on her. If I'd told her I felt creatively stifled and asked for her help finding a way back to music that didn't require burning our to the ground. She loved me enough to plan a honeymoon around my old dream of writing songs in Italy. Maybe she would have loved me enough to help me dream new dreams too. But I'll never know, because I chose betrayal over conversation, fantasy over reality, the easy lie of an affair or the hard work of an honest marriage. Now I sit alone with my expensive guitar and my mediocre songs, and I finally understand the difference between being trapped by someone else's fear and being trapped by own choices. The first kind of trap can be broken if we're brave enough to try. The second kind follows wherever go, because built it and carry the blueprints in bones. If we're reading this and thinking about stepping outside relationship for someone who makes feel like a better version of don't, that better version is a lie told by someone who doesn't know well enough to see flaws yet. Work on becoming that person within relationship or end relationship honestly, and then work on becoming that person alone. But don't for a fantasy, because fantasies don't hold when are sick, or remember dreams when forgotten them, or love enough to tell when are wrong. I learned that the woman I thought believed in me most was actually my biggest saboteur. But I also learned that the woman who truly believed in me was making dinner in our kitchen, while I someone else at a wedding. Some discoveries come too late to matter. But they're still worth making if only to warn the next fool, who thinks the grass is greener in someone else's bed. The grass is just different problems, different compromises, different ways to be disappointed by own limitations. The only person who can save from the don't want is, and cheating isn't saving. It's just a more complicated way of drowning.